Namaskara, Bengaluru. ಹೇಗಿದ್ದೀರಾ? So yeah, I'm really excited to be talking to you guys. It's Bangalore evokes fond memories. Spent 6 years in Bangalore. I My first work was in Bangalore, so yeah, it always evokes fond memories. And thank you, everybody for joining us from all across the world. So just want to check if you guys are able to see my screen all right. Okay, perfect. So today I'm going to be telling you the story of how we developed the Rogue, which is our latest bike here at Bowhead. What are the difficulties we encountered and how we overcame it. So we took about 14 to 15 months to develop this bike, which is pretty quick in terms of product development. And hopefully I get to open some SolidWorks CAD, share some of our drawings and share some of the lessons learned. The takeaway would be to how to make most of the SolidWorks suite of apps of 3D experience and how to get most of your product development process. So let's get started. So before I begin, I would like to talk quickly about what Bowhead is, what we do. So we are a adaptive mountain bike manufacturing company. Basically, we make mountain bikes for people, with mobility issues who are wheelchair users. And we started our company unofficially when our founder, Christian Bag, met with an accident almost 25 years ago while snowboarding. And he was paralyzed waist down. And he was a very passionate, or he is rather a very passionate mountain biker. And he was looking for ways to get back to the mountains. And he was a technical person. He's a technical person. He's a machinist by training. So he was looking for ways, trying to innovate different things to get back to the mountains. And almost 4 years ago, when he made the first Reach, which is our all electric adaptive mountain bike, he found that, yes, this is what would enable him to go back to the mountains and, do the things that he loved. And very soon he realized that there's a lot of people wanting to do the same, and that is how Bowhead started. And I had the pleasure and the honor of joining Christian in his basement, in the initial days of Bowhead. Uh, uh, Imagine a cold, dark basement, with the lathe machine whirring beside you as you're trying to work. So from there, fast forward to about 3.5 years, we are now, we have our own building. We are 15 to 16 employees strong. We have 3 different bikes, Reach, RX, Rogue, and also the kids version of the Rogue. And we're also getting into wheelchairs. So our story has been phenomenal. And all of this is thanks to the way we are using SolidWorks, thanks to how SolidWorks has been supporting us, the way, the 3D experience revolution was also right on time to for us to leverage that and sort of compress our time to market and product development process. So a bit about our bikes. We have 3 bikes, Reach, which is an all-electric adaptive mountain bike. RX is a e-assist hand-cranked motor mountain bike. And Rogue is also a hand-cranked e-assist mountain bike. And we also have a kids version of the Rogue. And pretty soon, we'll be coming out with our own wheelchair and related accessories. Right now, we have what we call the Sevens, which is a hubless caster for wheelchairs. Do check our products out on our website. They're pretty cool. They're pretty cool looking. I think one of the best ways to learn about our wheelchair accessories is through our website. All right, so I want to talk about why we felt the need for developing Rogue, our latest bike, right? So as I was saying, we already had the Reach. That was the very first bike we started with. And the Reach is an all-electric bike. It's just you sit on the bike, you press the throttle, and off you go. Not much human effort required. And it is for extreme terrain. There is no terrain that the Reach cannot go to. A lot of if you see our YouTube channel or Instagram channel, people keep posting all the cool things they do with the Reach, right? So the Reach is more like extreme terrain to sort of a mid terrain. And then the unique aspect of Reach is that it has the articulating front end. Let me see if I can quickly show you what I mean by that. So yeah, I'm just trying to share the CAD of the articulating front end. So it is this assembly that makes our mountain bikes unique. So this assembly sort of enables the differential. One second, sorry, I'm having trouble splitting my screen here. All right, there you go. So this articulation assembly enables the front wheel to have almost 7 inches of differential, and your suspension is also independent. And that is what enables our bike to be so capable and traverse all of these different mountainous terrains, right? So so now we also have the RX, which is a hand cranked version. It has a Bosch motor, which is the tried and tested e-bike engine, if you can call it that way. And it also has the same articulating front end, so it also has the same extreme terrain capabilities. But as Christian likes to say, it is not the bike, it is the person riding the bike that sort of limits you when you're riding the RX, because you need to crank it. So there is a manual input, and then when you're tired, you cannot go any further. But it's still an extreme terrain bike. So now we felt that there was a requirement for people who are not really avid mountain bikers, who want to ride the bike, maybe go for an occasional mountain ride, but mostly want to ride in the city or want to ride gravel. So it's sort of diversifying your product from the peak extreme capability machine, the Reach and the RX, to something that is a low barrier for entry. Because there is a learning curve associated with Reach and RX, you sort of have to learn how to balance the bike the same way that you balance any other two-wheeled bike. Right. So a Rogue would be more like you sit, you crank, and off you go, right? And that was the need, or that was the reason why we decided to develop a bike. So I would say it is from a city driven, pavement driven to sort of a gravel and an occasional mountain bike. Bike is what the Rogue is. So now, if I were to talk about our product development cycle, as you can see on the screen, that is the screenshot of the Rogue. I'm sorry, this is a screenshot of the RX, the hand cranked mountain bike. And so when we were developing RX, or just after we launched RX, we had about 867 unique parts between two of our bikes and all the accessories related to the bikes. And that meant like our system had to handle more than 2,000 parts because there's revisions, there's variants, etc. And it's our bikes are complex. There's a lot of engineering that goes into our bikes, and complex products require reliable systems to manage the product data. It's not easy to manage all of your product data when you have so much going on with your product, right? So our bikes are complex. There's a lot of variants. There are highly customizable. That means your bill of materials is also pretty customizable. It's pretty unique. So then you come across this challenge of how do you communicate all of this to the different stakeholders in your company, to the production team, right? Uh, so for startups like us, it is a pretty big challenge. And even if you keep your product development simple, which is what our product development cycle is, as you see on the screen, it's concept, design, testing, iterate it till you find a proper version, or till you're happy with that particular version, go to production, release to market, right? That is the simplest product development cycle there can be. But unless your system is robust and flexible, it's very difficult to manage all of this. And I should say we use SolidWorks suite of apps. We use SolidWorks Visualize, we use SolidWorks Premium, Simulation, Composer, and we use 3D Experience to manage our product data, to manage our bill of materials, to manage our changes. And it is this combination that sort of helped us realize the effectiveness of the product development. So we are able to develop bikes in about 12 to 15 months because we have effectively utilized all of these apps, effectively shortened our product development cycle so that our bikes reach to market on time within within a short span of time. So one of the things about product development is that the front end is often called fuzzy. It's called the fuzzy front end. The reason is it's very difficult to come up with sort of a product specification to meet your market needs, to meet your user needs. Because this is something new that you're trying to do. Of course, there are like benchmark studies, there are feasibility studies, which again take their own time. Take a couple of months, depending on how complex your product is. But that sort of lengthens your product development cycle, if you will. So one of the things with Bowhead was it was not that fuzzy for us, frankly, because Christian has a lot of experience with mountain biking. He's been a wheelchair user for almost 20, 25 years now. So he sort of knows what works and what doesn't, and what product. He sort of has this vision of the product. Along with it, we also have a community of riders. There is almost, I would say, 6 to 8 riders all across Canada and the States, whom we can reach out to for any sort of feedback. It will be very easy for us to test something by sending the parts to them. They're tech savvy, they can build things, and they will tell us, hey, this works, this is beautiful, or something like, hey, this doesn't work, it's hard to assemble, the ride is bad. They're technical mountain bike riders, so they can gauge how the bike is just by sitting on it, right? And so we relied on Christian's experience and our community of riders to sort of create that strong product vision, which led to our specifications without having to spend months and months trying to answer a question about what the product specification would be, or trying to do some sort of a feasibility study. So because of this, we were able to significantly cut some time off our product development cycle. So one of the things that is sort of unique to Bowhead, I should say, is that we sort of commit to our design very early on. So as you can see on the screen, this was a rendering that we did with SolidWorks Visualize, and we released this sometime in June of 2022. And the reason we did this was we sort of wanted to gauge how the market would react to this product. We sort of wanted to gauge the interest. And it also sort of helps us validate our product vision. We were pretty committed to a color scheme very early on in our product design cycle. As you can see, the shades of blue there. And we were like, okay, what are people saying? Do people like this? Or do people come back and say, hey, this is the worst thing I've seen? And it is one of the important reasons for this is that it's pretty low stakes at this point to course correct. You're so early on in your design, you're not committed to your design or colors or what have you. But if you feel that, okay, I have to change something, it's not gauging it's not creating the interest that I think it should have, then you can correct it without really committing to the cost and the time at this point. But thanks to say that this bike, this rendering generated a lot of interest. At that point, there was more than 164,000 views. There was more than 7,000 likes and hundreds of comments, which for a startup like us is pretty important, right? So as I said, this was sometime in June of 2022. We created this initial rendering. We took about a month's time and about 3 engineers to create this, to sort of CAD it out and do the rendering. And this was still pretty much a concept. There was no assembly connections. There was no detailed design. There was no DFM or DFA done at this point. There was no manufacturability or design for assembly that was considered. But as I said, we sort of sent some feelers out. We got a good response, and it was then the time to go start doing your detailed design. And by September of 2022, we had our very first prototype. As you can see on the screen, there's Christian writing it. There's also a lot of other Bowhead people wrote it. So what was the purpose of this prototype? So for any prototypes, so again, a really important aspect of your product development is you need to have a good prototype plan, a good testing plan. You need to know why you're creating that prototype. What is it that you want answered? So for us, for this prototype, it was definitely testing. We wanted to see how the bike behaved. What was your steering angle, camber angle? Is the suspension good enough? Are all the specification related to, say, the rear suspension that we had decided, is it going to give you that sort of a ride quality? Things like that. So for testing, we followed a structured approach. We sort of had different people testing it. Again, an important aspect of our bike is that since it's highly customizable, and people come in different sizes, right? So we almost can fit 90 to 95 percentile of the entire population, because we considered all of those aspects into design. There is your seat adjustability, there's your seat back adjustability, you can adjust the ride height, you can adjust how wide your cranks go. So that meant that it had to be tested with by different people to ensure that our ergonomics was spot on. And different terrain. This bike was supposed to cater different people for different terrains, from pavement to an occasional mountain ride. So we had to make sure that it fulfilled all of those conditions. And of course, resolving the design for manufacturing issues as we went through the design, right? So we did have a testing strategy. So you can see on your screen, there is Sean, who is a Bowhead employee, testing it out on one of the mountain trails. And we took it on a couple of different mountain trails. I personally took it to the Moose Mountain and rode it on the 727, which is a pretty difficult mountain biking track. And I'm not a mountain biker, but I enjoyed riding this very first prototype. And we learned a lot of things. You know, we documented those learnings. There were issues with respect to the front steering. There were a couple of issues with respect to the rear suspension. We documented those learnings systematically. And then I was like, all right, it's Christian's turn to ride this bike. So I and Max was another engineer who was developing this product along with me. We are like, let's give it to Christian. And I think it was, it was end of September. We give the bike to him, and it's about lunchtime. We decide to go to a restaurant to grab some lunch. We had barely reached the restaurant, and I get a text from Christian saying, broken bike, please help. And I was like, I just called him, like, what happened? And he says, the bike's broken. He sort of tells me where he is, and he asks us to come and pick him up. And that event sort of struck me as to the importance of the design. For example, if it was you or me or any of the people, most of the people on this call, if we had a broken bike, what would we have done? We'd have just gotten off our bike, pushed it back to the shop, and that's it, fix the bike, right? But Christian could not do that because he was a wheelchair user. He is a wheelchair user. And the bike was his wheelchair at that point, right? Because he left the wheelchair back in the shop. He was using his bike to go to places. And if the bike breaks, that's it, he's stranded, right? So that sort of gives you an idea of how much engineering needs to go into this, because we don't want our customers to get stranded. And anyways, to cut the story short, we pick him up. He's at a nearby biking trail. And what had happened was the stud, which is shown in this by this arrow here. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but I'll also show you in the CAD. So that stud, which sort of holds your suspension and the rocker arm, broke. It was a clean fatigue failure. So all of the testing that we did on the mountains and sort of stressed it to a point that when Christian went for a ride, it just broke, right? But this is what engineers want, right? Engineers build things to break things, to learn how to make it stronger. And that is what we did. So the next iteration, we corrected the design. We made sure that it was stronger. We got a realistic idea of the forces that were going through that particular subassembly, and we corrected the design to make sure that it was stronger, that such an event didn't really happen the next time. So these were, again, as I said, some of the difficulties that we encountered and some of the things that we had to overcome. So now, if I were to talk about, say, the rear suspension, there are a couple of things that go into your suspension design. And one of the things that we had observed in our testing was the rear wheels were very wobbly. There was they were rattling a lot. And we were trying to find out why, and we realized that the wheels were towed out significantly. So before I go into details and describe what had happened, I quickly want to touch upon some of the things we had considered for our rear suspension design. So one is your percentage sag. This is basically how much your suspension compresses when you sit on the bike. So Bangalore, I'm sure a lot of people ride motorbikes and mopeds, right? So when you sit on your motorbike, your bike sort of goes down a bit, sort of up, compensates for your for your weight. And so the reason you do that is so the suspension gets compressed to whatever percentage that you've designed it for. That enables the suspension to track your terrain in a much better way. So you come across a bump or you come across a pit in the road, your suspension will follow that. It'll ensure that the tires, the wheels are sticking to the ground, right? And they are not flying off the moment they encounter a resistance on the road. So we designed it for almost 30% of percentage sag, and we found that it is a good soft ride, but we wanted it to be even a softer feel. So for the next prototype, we changed it to 35% sag. And camber is essentially the angle that your wheel makes with respect to the vertical plane, and a certain amount of camber is necessary to ensure stability, especially when you're cornering at high speeds. And we had about 0 to 3 degrees of camber, again depending on the ride height, where your suspension is with respect to the wheels that you're using on the bike. And toe in, toe out. So this was a problem that we encountered. So what had happened was we included almost a 3-degree camber on our wheels, and the toe in, toe out itself, we designed it for a 0 toe, meaning your wheels are perfectly parallel. There's no toe in, toe out, because we wanted to see how that felt before we committed to some sort of a toe in, right? And but one of the things that we did not account for is when we assembled the rear suspension to the bike, the connection between the rear subassembly and the frame was almost at an angle which was, I think, 10 or 20 degrees angle. So what happens when you have a camber and then you're rotating it further by 20 degrees? your wheels toe out, right? So it's a simple math. And that is what had exactly happened. We had not accounted for it. So our wheels were towed out by almost an inch, and that is why they were wobbling. And the other, so before I go to the ride height, I quickly want to show you how you calculate the toe. So the toe is basically the distance between the rear of your wheels, on the rear end of your wheels, minus the distance on the front end of your wheels. So dr minus df, it's if it's positive, it means it's toe in, meaning the front of your wheels are pointing inwards. If it's negative, that means it's toed out. The wheels, the front of your wheels are facing away from each other. And as I would say 0 to 5 millimeters of toe in is acceptable. Sort of helps you travel state when you're cranking at a high speed. A zero toe is okay too. Toe out would mean your bike would be really wobbly. The right characteristic would not be that great. So now, all right, so we sort of discovered that the wheels were towed out. So how do you correct it? Well, it was a simple fix, really. All I had to do was, this is the upright, right? So all I had to do was change the angle of the wheels so that they towed in, or that there was a zero toe. That meant this blue part that you see here, the upright, I had to change the angle on the front face. So we were using 27.5-inch wheels. So I figured out what the angle is. I found out that if I uh, create an angle which is 0.6 degrees to the normal, that's it. That fixes your toe-in, toe-out problem. But then a couple of days later, Christian requested that we also design to use 24-inch wheels, basically smaller wheels on the rear, and continue using bigger wheels on the front. And the reason was that smaller wheels would make it really nimble. You'd still need a bigger wheel on the front because it's a front drive. So bigger the wheel on the front, the better. But smaller wheel would mean your bike overall length reduced, and the bike was more agile and more nimble. And some people liked it that way, right? Now this presented a problem. And what was the problem? So as you can see, this is the bike which has 27.5-inch wheel on the front and on the rear. But now let's say that you switch it to 24-inch wheel on the rear. So you see what happened. You obviously cannot have a bike like this that has to touch the ground. In fact, it will touch the ground, but what will happen is your frame will get inclined, correct? But that was not acceptable for us because that meant your ground clearance then reduced. And we wanted to maintain a consistent ground clearance. So that meant that you had to raise your suspension, or lower the wheel and sort of raise your ride height. So that meant your suspension had needed to adjust for the height. It had to account for the ride height. And that was not good news for the toe end, because that means that whenever you change, your toe would change, because we have two different compound angles going. You have the camber going, and then you have the 20-degree angle that you see here, where this entire rear subassembly is assembled, right? So now what do we do? How do we solve this problem? So here's what we did. So let me take this opportunity to open some CAD and sort of go through some of our assemblies here. Right. I just got a notification that there's some problem with my mic. Are you guys still able to hear me all right? Prasad, can you hear me? Okay, awesome. All right, let me just switch to the right assembly here. Having trouble with my screen. Sorry guys, just bear with me. All right. So this is our rear subassembly. It's a linkage swing arm suspension. As you can see, there's two shocks, and then this is your upper swing arm. This is your lower swing arm, and this is the upright. So the wheels are sort of connected to the upright. So I don't show the wheels because they're assembled in the top level of the assembly. So this is where your wheel axle goes, and your wheel is sort of parallel to that upright. And so whenever you encounter any bump on the road, the wheel sort of goes up and compresses the shock, and that is how this entire system works, right? So let me zoom back a little. So yeah, so the wheel goes up, and then there's the turnbuckle. This is your turnbuckle, which sort of connects the swing arm and the rocker assembly and compresses your shock. So now this rocker assembly is connected with this stud here, and this is what broke when Christian was riding it. And we sort of fixed it by making it beefier and changing it to steel. Right, so this is our rear subassembly. 1 minute. I'm having trouble seeing the top of my screen because of Zoom. Zoom is showing some of that content there, but I really need to change this mate here to, yeah, I'm just locking my shock so that it doesn't. All right. All right, so now what is the problem, right? So what I have done here is I have sort of created a sketch which sort of gives you how my wheels sort of look like. So let's say this is my 27.5-inch wheel. So this is my wheel. This is my axle, which is perpendicular to your upright. And as I said, I sort of fixed the issue of toe in toe out for the bigger wheel, the 27.5-inch wheel, by creating an angle to this face. So if I measure the angle between this face and this face, you will notice that it is not 90, it is 89.4, meaning this face is 0.6 degrees inclined to your right hand plane. And so I also created another sketch which sort of measures the toe in toe out. Now I figured, all right, so let me do it for all the different wheel sizes that we have, because I don't want Christian coming in and say, hey, we want to do it for a 20-inch wheel as well. Right? So I have my DF and DR for 20-inch, 24-inch, and 27.5-inch. So, and then I also have my rear distance. So using that sketch, I simply measured the difference between the front of the wheel and rear of the wheel with respect to my right-hand plane. So this is what that sketch gives. It sort of gives you half of that distance. And then I created an equation in that assembly to sort of give me the toe. So since we're talking about 27.5-inch wheel, so this is the toe currently. So if it's positive, it's towed in. So it is almost zero. We can say it's negligible, 0.8. So all right, so that problem was solved. But now, as I said, if we want to go for a 24-inch wheel, what I will have to do is I'll have to raise my rear end. And I found that to raise my rear end, I have to change my turnbuckle distance to 128 millimeters. So what am I doing here? Let me show you very quickly. So this is your turnbuckle. So these sort of ride on the rod end. So there's threads on both ends, and you can like rotate it. That changes the distance between your swing arms, and that will basically lower or raise your rear suspension. So so what I've done here, so you can see that by changing that mate to 128, this arm has lowered. So I'll do the same thing for the other side. So I'll make it 128. Hit the traffic light symbol 1 second. Yeah. All right, so there you go. So your suspension's been lowered. So now let's check what's happened to our toe end. So now we're talking about 24-inch wheel, correct? So it's not updating. All right, there you go. So now you see for 24-inch wheel, your toe is almost 9 millimeters. Now that is a lot. You don't want it to be too much because then you'll see your tires wear really quickly. So that told me that this angle has to be different for your different wheel sizes, right? So again, using simple SolidWorks equations and sketches, you can find out what's going on in your assembly, and you can resolve things like this. So what did we do? So we ended up creating a different version of your upright, and so this is that configuration which uses your different upright. So let me switch to that configuration really quickly. All right, so as I said, that angle was 0.6 degrees inclined. For this configuration, I found that it should be 0.3 degrees inclined for the different wheel sizes. So now if I go back to my sketch and see what happens when so there you go. So now I will ignore this because that is for a different configuration. So for mixed wheels, which is a way of saying that your front wheel is different and your rear wheel is different, your toe is 2.69 millimeters, which is okay. So 0 to 5 millimeters of toe is acceptable. And I also found out the same for a 20-inch wheel in case we decide to use 20-inch wheel. And in fact, for the kids version, we decided to switch to a smaller version. So I was glad that I did this. So of course, for a 20-inch wheel, I'll have to raise the front end slightly more, but it'll still be within acceptable range. So that is how we resolved this toe in, toe out issue, again, using really simple sketches and equations from SolidWorks. Right, so we went through all 4 of those things, percentage sag, camber, toe in, toe out, right, and how it sort of affected our ride quality. And yeah, so this was where I was going to just talk about the assembly. So it was time for us to go back to the SolidWorks to correct all of this. And based on what I just described, that is how we corrected the toe in, toe out issue. All right, so our second prototype, our first prototype was a success. We found out a lot of things. We now had to answer all of those questions. We had to work out all of those problems and create the very second prototype. So what was the plan for our prototype? So we, by the time we came up with the second prototype, it was November of 2022. And the things that we wanted to solve in this was of course, address all of the issues that you found in the very first prototype, like the toe in, toe out, and the components breaking, etc. Verify and validate the remaining issues from the very first prototype. Then we also had to make sure that we get this production ready. We have to verify the assembly sequence, take a look at what jigs and fixtures are needed to assemble this, create and design those jigs and fixtures. Then we also decided to utilize the actual manufacturing methods. For some of the components, we had just machined it. But for example, for the seat back, this was a plastic which was vacuum formed. So we decided to commit to a tool, create a vacuum formed plastic tool. And then you can see that it has fabric here. And then there is the chain guard. So the very first prototype did not have all of these fancy things. But this was one way of getting our prototype closer to production and closer to the actual model, because there's of course a lot of safety considerations like chain guard, and then there's a lot of soft goods issues like your fabric. So all of those things we had to start addressing in this particular prototype. Another thing that I'm reminded of as I talked about the seat is the very first prototype. Our seat was sort of, it was a fancy ID shape, something like that. But we realized that that was a no-go, because a lot of our riders who are tall, their elbows sort of hit the back of your seat as you cranked. So that meant we had to go with this sort of a shape to provide some clearance to your elbows as you cranked. So a lot of those things we found out and we fixed, and we were sort of going towards more DFM and DFA. Those were the things that we had to answer in this prototype. Of course, we also tested the second prototype to sort of a rigorous testing. Like the first one, took it again to some of the mountain bike trails. It was cold, but we still did it, and sort of validate if all of those ride quality issues were fixed. And once we verified that, it was then the time to get the Rogue production ready. So let me take this opportunity to quickly go through some of our drawings. So since I talked a bit in detail about the rear suspension, I do want to share the rear suspension drawing with you guys. So so this is just a PDF. We use SolidWorks, of course, to create drawings. It's just much quicker to go through the PDFs. That is why even though I have the drawing open, we could take a look at that again if you want. And so as you can see, it sort of has your complete bill of materials on here. It sort of includes your final checklist. So this is the document that our production team uses to actually build the rear suspension, the entire subassembly. So it has all of the information. It also has a lot of step-by-step, it has a lot of steps. It sort of goes through sequence of the actual intended way of building it. So there is the initial steps of doing all your bearing presses. We sort of give a lot of instructions with respect to, adding grease, adding Loctite, adding torque to your fasteners, detailed view for orientation, right? So this is yeah, again, so as you can see, the red line sort of indicates that you need to use a particular version of the Loctite. You need to use a red Loctite, again, 264. The production team sort of knows what grade of Loctite they need to use. And then the torque, right? So these are really important aspects of your assembly. And if I quickly go, so as we discussed, we found out that there were two different variants of the upright and the turnbuckle to account for the different toe in, toe out. And this is where we sort of communicate that, right? So for same wheel size on the front and rear, this is the variant that you need to use, and this is that particular upright. And for large front wheels and small rear wheels, which is also the case with our kids version, where you have a 24-inch wheel on the front and a 20-inch wheel on the rear, you need to use these sort of variants to build your assembly, right? And then if I go here, so this sort of gives you the check as well. So it's not just enough to build your assembly, but you also need to do certain quality checks to ensure that, hey, everything's perfect. So we also identify a lot of critical to quality dimensions, critical to function dimensions on our, even on our part drawings and even on our assembly drawings. So this is the critical turnbuckle setting. It is basically, if I zoom in here, so the distance between those lock nuts. So there is a lock nut on either side of my turnbuckle, and I need to measure the distance between those, right? So if you see the table here, it sort of gives you what that distance is. So if I'm using 24-inch wheel on the front, that is the same front wheel, same size front wheel, or if I'm using a larger front wheel, then that distance should be 110 millimeters. But if I'm using a large front wheel and a small rear wheel, be it 24/20 for the kids version or 27.5 and 24 for the adults version, you need to use a 128 millimeter turnbuckle setting. Now, I also want to stretch here the importance of speaking the same language. Now, in my CAD, I could have chosen any random plane and decided, okay, this is the distance. But it is important that the engineers in production, they speak the same language. And that is why the distance you saw in the assembly when I changed it to 128 was the same as what I actually did, actually is called out on the drawing. So uh, so if you look at my assembly for the same size, the distance made that I have given is 110 millimeter. So this sort of means that there's no confusion. You sort of speak the same language. Tomorrow, if there's an issue, you're on the same page, right? I cannot stress that enough. So, and then this is your last step where you sort of attach your brake adapters and the entire assembly is done, right? So, yeah, so as I said, one second. Yeah, so as I said, it is things like this that helped us, shorten some of the or reduce some of the pain points that other companies usually see. So one of the other things, so one might think that, all right, so we have done the product testing, we have done the production, we have finished everything, right? Not quite. There's still a lot of work to actually release your product to the market. So now this is the phase where you want to start thinking about your maintenance and service, your spare parts. So a lot of our riders might want to upgrade something on their bike. So we will just typically send them some parts or assemblies, and they would want to assemble it themselves. And then there's a lot of adjustment with respect to our bikes, right? So you would want to make sure that they are aware of how to do the different adjustments, like adjusting the seat back, adjusting the seat back and front, or adjusting your leg loops. So we sort of utilize the SolidWorks composer to create all of these instructions and communicate with our customers that, hey, this is how you adjust your bike when you get it. So this is a video. In fact, this was done by one of the team sitting in India. We sort of utilize a team in Pune who sort of do some SolidWorks composer videos for us. They even do some of our change action stuff. So we sort of utilize their help to create a simple video that sort of instructed the user on how to change your leg loop length, which is where your legs get strapped on the bike, right? So it is a simple thing that you need to loosen the screws, adjust the leg loop, and then tighten it back. But you need to consider this in your product development cycle. It's an important aspect to your product specification in a way. So so this was the time where we addressed a lot of these. We created a lot of these content and addressed a lot of these things ahead of time to make sure that we had everything when we actually released the bike to market. So come March of this year, we had already started accepting our first orders, and I'm happy to say that we have sold a lot of road bikes. There's a lot of interest, and sometime mid this year we launched the kids version, and it's also generating a lot of waves amongst our community. So quickly want to summarize. We looked at how we utilized SolidWorks apps from concept till production. So right from visualize, where we created that initial rendering and sent it out in the market to get the feel of how this bike, what is the interest that this bike creates, to actually using simulation to address a lot of our failures, to using Composer to creating all of those technical documentation. And of course, 3D experience was managing our data, was managing the n number of revisions that we created during this stage. And when we decided to release the product of course, we used 3D Experience again to release all of our drawings and assemblies and things like that. And we sort of saw how one can leverage a strong product vision, the experience that your company personnel have or your potential customers have, to sort of make that front end less fuzzy and have a clear-cut idea of the product that you're trying to create. And of course, planning for prototype and testing, addressing specific things to a particular prototype, like, all right, this prototype is going to answer this particular thing with respect to my product. My prototype 2 is mostly going to be about my design for assembly. Things like that will also help reduce a lot of pain points in your development cycle. And organizing data, parts, assemblies, making sure your engineers and production teams speak the same language, planning for all of your checklists and QC points on your assembly drawings also goes a long way to reduce a lot of pain points. So now, what's next for Bowhead? So it is exciting times at Bowhead. We are working on our wheelchair product lineup. Pretty soon, I think sometime early next year, we'll probably announce that or release that to the market. We'll probably get our very first prototype in a couple of months. And then there's also some upgrades to our bikes that we are planning. We're planning to upgrade our Reach bike with a new rear suspension and a new front end, sort of raise the ride quality to the next level. And I must say that 3D Experience has helped us a long way to come to this point. And almost all of our employees are using 3D Experience and SolidWorks suite of apps. So engineers, of course, use SolidWorks along with 3D Experience, but we also have a lot of production people. We have customer service. We have production managers using 3D Experience to sort of look up the drawing, create issues, request for change actions, things like that. So we're excited to take that forward on all of our products as well. So thank you so much on behalf of the entire Bowhead team.